In this lesson, we are going to determine what your goals should be and which ones that you should pursue right now. And I think that's really the question that we need to hone in on. Which goals are worthy of your attention and your focus at this very moment? Now, I have always been the kind of person who has a ton of different goals. So I'm going to use myself as an example here and kind of show you how I've, number one, listed out my goals, and then number two, how I choose the ones that I want to pursue. And hopefully you'll be able to follow along and do something similar. So I want to share the device that I have used for many, many years for both listing out my goals, iterating on them, making them even more difficult and ambitious, but also honing in on the ones that I want to focus on at any given moment. And it is called the Impossible List. Now, I cannot take credit for inventing this because it was actually created by a good friend of mine named Joel Runyon, who runs an entire brand called Impossible. And it kind of looks like a bucket list, but it's a little bit different. It's a little bit different in its philosophy. So a bucket list is really just a list of things that you'd like to do before you kick the bucket. People love to make these and then they aren't very serious about them a lot of the time. By contrast, the Impossible List is focused on active pursuit of your goals, on iteration. So when you look through my Impossible List here, you're going to see, number one at the top, a list of my current focuses, and I actually linked to a specific page called What I'm Doing Now. So it's just collegeinfogeek.com/now. And I try to update this page every once in a while. So I'm kind of deliberately making a statement of what I'm focused on in my life. And I can kind of refer back to that to make sure I'm not getting distracted. I also list my last 5 completed goals. And this is sort of a device for me to make sure that I'm not resting on my laurels and that I'm actually, progressing towards something in recent months. And then I have categories. So we have fitness and health goals. We have professional goals. We have habit goals, creative goals, all kinds of stuff. But the main thing you're going to see here is that for most goals that are crossed out, there is a new goal underneath it as a nested bullet. So the idea there is to complete a goal, and then I'll usually try to link to some proof of that goal and put the date there as well. And then I want to put something that is an iteration or a next step beneath that goal if I still care about that. And in doing that, I'm constantly pushing myself to keep improving. I don't want to just hit something and then call it good. So how do you create your own Impossible List? Well, it's just as easy as creating a bucket list. There's no app for it. There's no website for it. I put it on my website, and I do this personally because I want it to be kind of like a public stake in the mud of what I'm going to do. I use it as both inspiration to myself and to other people, but this could be something that is entirely private. So you could make a page on your own blog if you wanted to. You could make it a Word document or an Evernote note on your private computer, or you could even have it just be a piece of paper. But I do think it should be something that is easy to access and that you see often. That way it functions as a reminder. And when it comes to the goals that should be on your Impossible List, they can really be anything. And I would encourage you to just list anything that comes to mind at first, maybe on a draft of it or a piece of paper. But then when choosing what should be on the actual list, you should ask yourself, why does this goal for each goal matter to you? Because a lot of people tend to pick goals for reasons that aren't really intrinsically motivating. They might be goals that they saw other people have on their own lists. They might be goals that they just want to do for superficial reasons. I want to get strong so I look good to other people, not so that I'm satisfied with my own level of strength. So ask yourself, what is my motivation for each of these goals? And is it a motivation that's going to help me sustainably practice this goal over the long term? Or is it something that isn't going to provide me with a whole lot of motivation later on? Now, even once you've asked yourself why for all these goals, you might still have a lot of goals on the list. And that brings us to the next question. Which goals should you focus on? And how many of them should you focus on at any one given time? And that's really the crux here, because the more goals you take on at any one time, the less time you're going to have during each day to put practice into them. And a lot of practice is needed to make meaningful progress. And I like to think about this in terms of like a miner trying to mine for gold or jewels or something. So miners are looking for gold, silver, whatever in the ground, but they almost never find it during the first 15 minutes of a digging session, right? They have to dig deep. And there's a lot of work that goes into getting to the point where you're close to the actual stuff you're trying to mine out of the ground. And I think of this in the same exact way for writing or for music or literally anything else I'm doing. There's probably going to be 15 or 20 minutes of just sort of warming up or setting up or getting into the flow state that is going to be needed before I actually get to the point of a practice session where I'm actually making things happen. And if I'm trying to juggle 10 different goals every single day, if I'm trying to go to the gym and practice music and learn a language and write a book, then I'm not going to get to that deep part of the mines where all of the gold is. I'm just going to be excavating dirt and then putting it right back and coming back the next day and making no progress. So commit to selecting a small number of goals. I would say no more than 3 or 4, depending on how ambitious they are and what they are. Otherwise, you're gonna find yourself just sort of spinning in circles and not making progress on any of them. And that brings us to a possibly apocryphal, possibly not true story about Warren Buffett. And the story goes like this. One day, Warren Buffett was talking to his private jet pilot, and the pilot was asking him about achieving goals. And Warren Buffett told him to do 2 things. Number 1, to write down a list of the top 25 goals he had in his life. Just get them all out on a list, just like we did with the impossible list. And the pilot went and did it. He said, cool, I got my goals, Warren, what's next? And he said, the next thing to do is to circle the top 5 that are the most important goals to you. So the pilot goes off, dutifully circles the ones that are most important to him, comes back and says, all right, Warren, I think I got it. So you're saying the top 5 goals that I have circled are my most important. I should focus on them the most. And then the other 20 goals I can just sort of do in my free time, do a little bit over here, but I really need to focus on these ones more often than not. And Warren said, no, the remaining 20 goals on your list are now your do not do list. Because anything that you had an interest in doing before is going to be a potential distraction to the things that you have deemed most important. And this is especially true once you hit the dip. And this is a term that Seth Godin made up, Seth Godin being a very famous marketing writer and author. And essentially the dip is that point in your progress in any specific goal where things get hard. You get mired in the stuff that isn't fun, and all the novelty from the beginning stages of the goal have kind of worn off. So take playing guitar, for example. You get the guitar, you get lessons, you're all excited, you learn to play your cowboy chords, you learn to play Smoke on the Water, and now your teacher's like, all right, we're gonna do scale exercises for 17 hours. Now you're in the dip. That's not fun. Even as a guitarist who's been playing for 10 years, I can tell you scale exercises are not fun, but they are important. But if you did not take the goals that were less important and put them on a do not do list, those are going to function as very strong temptations for things to distract yourself with. So if you're in the dip for playing guitar and you also had piano on your list, you also had vocal lessons on your list, you might be like, well, guitar's hard now. I'm gonna go take vocal lessons. I'm gonna go try piano. You know, this is kind of difficult. Maybe this isn't for me. You kind of have to commit to not letting these things that are sort of interesting distract you from the ones that you have decided are the most important. Because the people who actually get through the dip are the ones who commit. They're the ones who kind of dig their heels in and make a habit out of working even when they're in that dip. And I want to put special emphasis on that word work, because in my mind, there are 3 different types of progress for any given goal. There is gear acquisition, learning, and then deliberate practice, or in other words, work. And here's the thing, each of these 3 things gives you satisfaction, but they give you satisfaction on different time scales. Gear acquisition, it brings a lot of satisfaction right away. You can go out and buy a guitar as long as you have enough money, and you're gonna feel good about it. Learning, that takes a little bit longer. You can get a course, you can go through that course, learn a new technique, and it's a little bit less impulsive, a little bit less like, instant gratification than gear acquisition, but it's still pretty quick because you just kind of have to sit there and intake the material. Deliberate practice, that's where the most rewards lie, but that's also where the most work has to be invested and where the gains are the slowest. And once people have acquired the necessary gear to get started, once they have gone through a few introductory lessons, they really have to start practicing before any more gear or any more lessons are going to be very helpful. And that's the tough thing. That's where people realize they have to put in a ton of extra effort to get the same amount of satisfaction that they got from just buying some gear, going through lessons. And that's why it can be very easy to get distracted and to move on to something else. And it's also why it can be very easy to fall into gear acquisition syndrome, where instead of putting more deliberate practice in, you go on the internet and you Google top 10 guitar accessories. And you're like, well, what if I just got a tuner and some better strings and a better amp? Then I'm gonna sound way better. And yeah, you might, but the amount of progress you're gonna get from that, the amount of satisfaction you're gonna get from that is not the same as what you're going to get by just putting in the hours and actually learning how to play the guitar. So before we move on to the action steps for this lesson, I do want to touch on a couple of common concerns that people often have. And these seem kind of opposite, but I think they're both important to talk about. So the first one is the worry that you're not going to have enough time in your lifetime, but also on a smaller scale, in hours in the week to achieve your goals. And the overall answer to that question is, yeah, you're not going to have enough time to achieve all of your goals. But neither am I. Neither is the singer of my favorite band, the Deer Hunter. But you know what? The Deer Hunter's put out like 8 albums and they're all amazing. And I've put out a pretty good amount of work in my career that I'm pretty proud of. And I'm still putting out work every single day. So what you kind of have to realize is that you're never going to be able to achieve every single ambition you have. That's just the reality of having a limited amount of time on Earth. But with that time, you can focus in on a limited number of goals. You can really go hard on them and you can make things that really impact the world. And that's a great thing. The other concern is, well, what if I don't have any goals? And when people ask me this, it's not as common as the I have too many goals question, but sometimes I will get emails from people who are like, I just don't know what I want to do. I'm ambitious, but I don't really know what to focus on. I can't really think of anything. And for those people, I would say, go look at my impossible list. Go look at the bucket lists of other people. Go look at people you admire and ask yourself, do any of the things that these people have done or that they have on their lists, do these resonate with me? Because when people don't know what they want to do, it is often a manifestation of just not having tried very many things, of not having a whole lot of experience. I remember in college, a lot of my friends were like, I don't really have any interests, I don't have any passions. And I would ask them, have you tried going to different clubs? Have you tried going to events? And often the answer was no. So really, the problem of having no goals is often a symptom of having very little experience. You need to go out and get that experience just to sort of test the waters in different areas. So before we move on to the next video, first sit down and create your rough draft impossible list. List out all the goals that you would like to achieve. Then go through that possibly apocryphal Warren Buffett exercise and circle or identify the goals that are most important to you right now. And when we're talking about daily practice, it's probably a good idea to limit yourself to 1 to 3 goals. Otherwise, like we said, you're not going to make a whole lot of progress. You're not going to get deep enough into the minds for any one of those goals. And even if you do have 3 or 2 goals that you're going to pursue after this class, for the purposes of the lessons that are coming up next, identify one goal to focus on and use that goal as your own personal example for implementing the rest of what we're going to talk about. For my part, the goal that I'm pursuing right now and I'm going to be focusing on in these lessons is improving as a guitar player, but we'll also use examples from my past, including how I built my YouTube channel and also how I wrote my book, 10 Steps to Earning Awesome Grades. So let's get into it.